Good evening, everybody. Well, here we are, early November 2022, as I write this about B12 deficiency, something that seems to be on the increase. I'm having a busy week. I had a lovely day yesterday. I was at my daughter's graduation. God, that makes me feel old. And that's one of the things I'm going to mention tonight, because I want to talk about not just the reasons why the fact that reasons why B12 deficiency may be on the increase and not be detected necessarily in a blood test, but some of the common causes as to what may be behind this seems to be this general trend. Now, in the UK, we have what we call the medical professionals use something called NICE guidelines, carefully formulated. They help GPs assess patients and come up with recommendations. And according to that, most of the population won't have a B12 deficiency. In fact, if you're under 60, only 6%, it's still quite a significant figure, but only 6% of the population may have a lack of B12. Now, one of the reasons why I think there's an anomaly about this, that I seem to be hearing more and more about people who have symptoms associated with a deficiency, or have found out they've been blood tested for it, but actually a blood test, they may come back and say it's within a normal level and it's fine. One of the reasons I think this is because the NHS will test total B12, serum B12. It looks at total B12. Now, I know when I do blood testing or other testing in clients, what may be tested by the NHS could be limited in terms of the sort of information and the sort of markers that we may want to test for that gives us a more total picture about what might be going on. And when we come and look at B12, we've got total B12, but there is also another way to test for it, and it's called active B12, and it's to do with how much of the B12 circulating in the bloodstream is actually available for the body to use. And one of the things that I've read through one of the test companies that I use that will look at active B12 is because actually 70%, on average, 70% of the B12 that's circulating in the bloodstream is not available for the body to use, which is why it's so important to do a slightly different test and actively look at the active B12 that is available to be used. Because if 70% of the B12 on average is unavailable, some people could have 95%. Some people may have 50%, which is really good. But if you've got a really significant amount of the B12 that's not available to actively be used, that means it can be taken up into the cells and used by the body, then there's likely to be a problem going on. But if you went for the blood test with the NHS, it may come back as being perfectly normal. Another factor I think that's important, I should just say, is that if you look at the B12 range that the NHS uses, it's a very, very wide range. Off the top of my head, and this is just a guesstimate, but to give you an indication, it could go from something like, I don't know, 185 up to 800. Now that's a very big range. So if you were down at the 185 marker or even 200, for example, your doctor may say, well, it's all fine, it's in range. But if most of that was inactive, then you could start to have a problem, and hopefully that will sort of give a better perspective of this. Now, of course, there are certain symptoms you may want to look out for. Tiredness is a key one. I think a lot of people are aware of B12 and tiredness. You might have low concentration, you might have low mood, you might be a little bit more forgetful, you might have more poor sleep, you might feel slightly dizzy, you might start to get pins and needles. These are all quite common symptoms that could be associated with B12. Do bear in mind there can be other reasons why. But why wait to get a blood test to find out whether you are in this sort of like low B12, or indeed, you know, should you be testing for active B12, and indeed you'd have to take a private blood test that I can certainly arrange, or other practitioners could arrange for you to get a private blood test done that's going to measure active B12. Why wait for this? What I'm going to give you now are some of the major factors, lifestyle, diet, that can contribute to B12 deficiency or not having enough of the most bioavailable forms in the body. And the more of these that you can relate to, then the greater the need to do something about it, either to correct some of these factors, but you might not be able to correct them if age is one of the factors, or certainly to think, well, maybe I should do a test that is, well, certainly go to the GP to think about it. But if you want to really do the most accurate test available, then you want to think about the test that's going to give you the active B12 score. So I've got 7 of what I think are the most major factors that can really inhibit B12 availability in the body. As usual, these aren't in any particular order, but just be aware of these. So, number 1, do you experience digestive symptoms like bloating, burping, acid reflux, heartburn, or indigestion? Because these can be associated with low B12. Now, before you ask me, yes, I do know that you may think that some of these symptoms, like acid reflux and heartburn, could only be caused by having too much acid in the stomach. But unfortunately, the symptoms of low stomach acid can mimic the same symptoms of high stomach acid. And in my experience, in my practice, more often than not, I'm helping people with low stomach acid levels, not high stomach acid levels. So bloating, heartburn, acid reflux, burping, indigestion, that feeling of fullness, that feeling of you not being able to eat much in one meal. Very varied with different individuals, but these can all relate to having not enough stomach acid. Excuse me. Now, why is this important? Now, stomach acid, as we know, is very important for digestion. It helps to break down proteins in your meal, starts that really important digestion of protein foods. But what it also does is helps to pull apart the B12 in your protein food. Now, B12 is bound to protein in your animal foods, mostly in your animal foods. And what the stomach acid is going to do by that starting that protein digestion is going to pull apart the B12 from the protein foods to enable it to be absorbed into the bloodstream. So if you're low on stomach acid, excuse me tonight, if you are low on stomach acid, through some of the symptoms that you may have, they're the likely ones, it is going to make it more difficult for you to actively get the B12 from your food. Number 2, are you over 50? Unfortunately, as we get older, our stomach acid levels are naturally going to decline. That's why I bring up the age thing at the start. You know, I'm over 50. I know that my stomach acid levels are declining all the time. I think it can start to decline before 50. As you get to over 60, your levels are going to decline even more, which is why the NICE guidelines, I believe, is one of the reasons why it says over 60s, 20% risk of B12 deficiency. The older we are, the lower the amount of stomach acid we have. The less stomach acid we have, the harder it is to actively get the B12 from our food into our bloodstream. So over 50s, I'm afraid you have to give that a tick to make it saying, yeah, it's going to contribute to B12, possibly B12 deficiency. Are you following a vegan or vegetarian diet? If you are, this is a big tick, because most of the B12 is from our animal foods. Yes, you can get a little bit from algae, a little bit from seaweed, you can get a little bit from mushrooms, you can get a little bit from, oh, it's gone from me. Can't think of the word I want to use. It's these, some plant-based foods are going to give you a little bit of B12. However, the majority of the B12 that we need is coming from our animal foods, from meat or fish. I can't do anything about that. That is just a fact. So if you are vegan or vegetarian, be aware that it's a major risk factor for B12 deficiency. If you are eating animal foods, are you choosing naturally grazed poultry and beef that you're buying? And again, organic could be helpful too. And if it's organic, it's going to be naturally pasture grazed, you know, food. It's not going to be factory farmed, is it, if it's organic? This is very important because B12 can be found in the dirt and the soil. When animals are grazing in their natural habitat, and eating grass, or the poultry are pecking away, aren't they, at the soil, then they are going to get B12 from the soil. And what happens, this is going to have a major impact on the guts of the animals as well, because this also helps the guts to take up B12 in animals, not from us, but in animals. So naturally pasture grazed cattle and poultry are likely to have a higher amount of B12 in their bodies that we are then getting when we eat them. If you're going to have factory farmed, it's going to limit the amount of B12. And another factor that I read about is, factory farmed animals are not being fed what they should naturally be fed. They're going to be fed on grains. The grains are not going to be organic. The grains could be have been sprayed with pesticides, and the pesticides again are going to impact on the guts of the animals and could inhibit B12 availability in the bodies, and then obviously in the muscles and the meat that we're eating from the animals. Number 5, is your lifestyle quite stressful? Because I'm afraid yet again, stress impacts our digestive capability. When we are in fight or flight stressed mode, our bodies are not thinking about digesting food. Digestion is part and parcel of the parasympathetic nervous system. It's part of the rest and digest nervous system. When we're most relaxed, we are most able to digest our food. We are optimally in a position to be naturally releasing stomach acid and digestive enzymes as well. So it goes right back to what I said at the start about stomach acid levels. We need optimal amounts to be able to extract the B12 from our food and be able to absorb it into the bloodstream. The more stress we're under, and sometimes that can be very difficult to, manage our stress levels, but we need to be finding ways to manage our stress, try and get ourselves into finding ways to calm the body down, particularly when we want to be eating food. But the more stressful our lifestyle, I'm afraid that is going to potentially have an impact on our ability to extract B12 when we're eating. Do you consume alcohol on a nightly basis? Do you binge alcohol? Are you consuming more than your 14 units of alcohol a week? And that really should be the top amount, because alcohol is going to absorb B12 absorption, and it also depletes our stores. We know alcohol depletes vitamin B stores, and obviously B12 is a B vitamin. They're water soluble vitamins. They're not stored very well in the body. So the more alcohol we consume, the harder it's going to be to keep hold of the amount of B12 that we need. And finally, medications. Are you taking medications? And the two that I particularly want you to be aware of are proton pump inhibitors like omeprazole. And if you happen to take blood sugar medication like metformin, for two different reasons, research has shown that metformin can really limit the availability of B12 in the body. And proton pump inhibitors like omeprazole goes right back yet again to thinking about our stomach acid availability because of limiting the difficulty to get the B12 from our foods. So omeprazole, it's really going to have a major impact, not just on digestive capability, but being able to extract the B12 from our food. So those are what I consider to be the 7 major risk factors. So when we just start to think about that, if you're over 50, if you're feeling quite stressed, if you're vegan and vegetarian, straight away you can see there are 3 big risk factors that would, for me, make me think, do you know what? I may not be able to do anything about my stress right now. I may not be able to do anything about my age, and I'm a vegan or vegetarian and I'm not planning to change that. It would make me want to think about doing this test for active B12, and I can guide you on that if you're interested. And or to think about a supplement. And the best supplements that you can take are the ones that are methylcobalamin. I'll say that again, methylcobalamin, because that is the most active and most available form of B12 that you can get. There are sprays of B12, or you can get oral drops of B12 in that form. And again, if you can take the sprays or the drops in the mouth that are going to bypass the gut, then again, you're bypassing that whole gut, stomach absorption issue that we've spoken about. It gets absorbed in the mouth straight into the bloodstream and bypasses that whole gut problem. So it could be something you might want to think about. I always think, you know, we can just, if you haven't got any symptoms, you're not really sure, of course, the best thing to do is to think about testing for active B12, not just the total serum B12 that you get on the NHS. But you could think about supplementing methylcobalamin B12 in the forms that I've just mentioned for a short period of time to see if that makes a difference to any of the symptoms that I mentioned at the start of this. So thank you for watching tonight. Remember, this is recorded and held here in my Facebook group, but it's also available on my YouTube channel called Peyton Principles Natural Health. I will be writing the blog. This will be going out in my newsletter. And if you're not on my newsletter, do come and subscribe to it, or email me at caroline@peytonprinciples.com. So thank you for watching.